Welcome everyone to the Super Connector. The Super Connector, where we talk about all things related to sales, networking, leadership, and my personal favorite, how to win friends and influence people. Today, I'll be interviewing JD Daley. He's a special guest, mentor and founder of UCM, the Undeniable Closer Mastermind. He has 17 years in sales experience and 7 years in remote sales. Undeniable Closer has changed my life. It taught me that networking and human connection are the keys to finding opportunity in the professional sphere. Everything I've learned since I've started effectively networking with other remote sales professionals and entrepreneurs led me to open this podcast and improve myself every day. Now, JD, I'm so excited to have you on. This has been a long time coming. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been really enjoying the episodes.
Great, great. So let's get right into it. Can you tell me first, and to the audience here, what is UCM? What is the Undeniable Closer Mastermind?
It's a good question. Sometimes I ask myself that pretty much on a weekly basis. But UCM is a combination mastermind and mentorship, specifically because those two have been the most important things in my life. But it's a mentorship that guides remote salespeople to the highest levels of success. The areas that we focus on are personal and professional development, networking, from everything from personal branding to outreach to just communication with individuals and forming relationships, all the way to offer selection, onboarding, sales performance, and beyond to career advancement. So it's a community and a mentorship, specifically for remote salespeople that want to reach the highest levels.
Yeah, this just this introduction is great, man, because my story is totally involved with UCM. Everything that happened with me, it was 6 months ago. I was in Colombia and I met a random expat and he told me about remote sales. I had no idea what it was. And then 2 months later, I was going all over these Facebook forums. I didn't know what to do. And he said, go see JD Daley at UCM. And ever since then, you've seen the changes in me and you've seen
Mm,
the changes in my life. It's been incredible. And now I'm
absolutely.
on my way to Colombia, in Medellin in 2 months. We're gonna be living in a penthouse mansion, I think it is,
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely.
just with a bunch of digital nomads networking and having a great time. Now, one thing that I noticed when I first came into UCM, and it was very surprising to me, it's such a wholesome community.
Mm,
Like, people are so supportive of each other, and that's not easy to create in a school with how many people? There's a lot of people.
right.
How did that come to be? Do you consider yourself to be an integral part of creating that culture?
I think in the beginning, absolutely. I think UCM very quickly became bigger than what I thought it was going to be, and bigger than me. And so there's no way that I could be the person that makes the community what it is. That's like having one house in a neighborhood and calling it a community, right? So I think I think often of how we've been able to create this, and I think it comes down to core values. I think that when you hold true to your core values and you're open to everything else, meaning you and I have very different experiences, we have different beliefs, we have different personalities, and I don't think any of that matters. I think that creates a diversity in a community. But if we don't have similar values, that's where a lot of conflicts come from. And so, one thing that I wanted with UCM was to really, everybody is out there selling, the training, selling
Yeah.
this and that, and the dreams of what they can do, the results, right? But what I really wanted to do is make sure that I'm communicating the values and the community behind it. That way, I know that the people I'm attracting and the people I'm repelling serve a purpose, right? And that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm open to having that community and that diversity, but we have to share similar values. And so early on, I really made a point to communicate my standards and what I was about and what I wanted and what I didn't want. And also on the calls, being very honest with people and being okay with turning people down. Not because I didn't think they could do it, not because I didn't think they had potential, but I realized very early on that the integrity of the community itself is more important than any one individual. And so I was very mindful in the beginning to kind of form cornerstones around the right people, no matter where they're at in their journey, where they're out at in their experience or their life or their beliefs. But those core values, I think, is what has created that cohesiveness.
Yeah, because I noticed that when values align, networking is just so much easier.
Right.
And I've come across so many different people, people inside and outside of Undeniable Closer during my networking meetings. I've met people on LinkedIn. I've created incredible relationships that I never thought would be possible.
Right.
I mean, with people of all ages, not even in sales and
Right.
leadership, just completely outside of it from random meetings. I started talking to more people throughout my day. I
Right.
started reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. I started giving people more compliments. I started listening more, using my active listening skills, and it's created such a change in my life. And that's
Right.
why I believe so much in effective communication.
Right.
Now, what made you decide to create Undeniable Closer, UCM?
Yeah, it was a bit of an accident. So at the time, I had made the transition. Mostly, I was still doing a little bit of selling, but it was mostly what I call investment offers, and not the typical investment, but getting into the ground floor of organizations and help building their sales process and do kind of team building and things like that. And at the time, I was doing a couple rounds of interviews, and I was talking to people I really liked. I really thought they had potential, but they were just drowning in the interview process. It was like they got dropped in the middle of nowhere and they had no idea even what this industry was, what I was looking for. They had a false sense of confidence and no sense of preparation. And I noticed this was happening at an alarming rate. And so after an interview, I just decided there was one person I really liked and thought he had a ton of potential. He's young and kind of reminded me of myself when I started. And I just said, off the record, like, where'd you come from? How did you get here? How did you get into remote sales? And he told me a story, and it spoke to me. And it was the first time I found out about a certain program where they were charging $9,800 for basically, a PDF, a couple videos. It was very bare bones, and I realized I was amazed that people were spending that much, but I was also amazed at how little that company was doing to prepare people. And I had a group at that time and started kind of polling people to see how many other people had come from this program, and it was a ton. And I realized there was two programs that the vast majority of people were going through. And this was super interesting for me because it was the first time that sales was looked at as kind of a business opportunity, like a make money online. Uh, Growing up in sales, it was either you loved it and wanted everything to do with it, or you didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Most people, if they weren't in sales, they didn't never wanted to be in sales. And now people were stumbling in it and kind of treating it like this kind of make money online. And I realized that these companies were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads, selling this dream of, coaches lining up your pockets to, you know, all this crazy, it's a gold mine, gold rush mentality. And that was the first idea I had of, well, maybe if I took some of these people aside and maybe it was just a little side project. That's kind of the idea. Like, what happens if you take a few people and you give them the honest truth, and you give them a transparent, impactful advice, and you walk them through step by step, not just, hey, here's a script, good luck, but from day one all the way through. And so I decided to run a bit of after probably having, I think I had 100 strategy sessions where I just started talking to people and just seeing if this was actually something that people wanted. And so I decided to run a small case study, 5 people, and 55 people signed up. And
Wow.
so it was a little bit by accident. I thought maybe I'd run a couple a year, maybe 3, 4 a year, once a quarter. But I knew when 55 people signed up from the beginning, before I had any material, before I had a layout, before I had anything, no branding, no logo, no nothing, I knew that, oh, this is definitely in demand. And so that's kind of how it started. And I've just been kind of catching up to the idea ever since.
Great, great. And UCM is improving rapidly day after day. Can you tell me a little bit about this brand new phase of development in UCM 4.0?
Yeah, it's always been important to me in that I feel like there's always been a lag in the development of programs and training, but the marketing is always so sharp. And I always thought that was counterintuitive, that these companies are always on state of the art, figuring out the new way to sell the program, but they don't put the same attention into developing the program itself. And this being a fairly new industry, it's evolving rapidly. Even from the last 2, 3 years since I started UCM, so much has changed. And that was one of the commitments that I am going to continue to evolve. One, myself as a mentor. This was a new journey for me, and I don't pretend to have it all figured out. It was outside of my comfort zone, and it's something that I had to adjust to, but also adjusting to the market. And so this is our fourth version. We just launched UCM 4.0. It's a cultivation of my 17 years in sales, my 7 years in remote sales, but most importantly, my 3.5 years as a mentor, really taking the feedback and not just assuming that this is the way I learn, so everybody learns that way, or this is my assumption. But I've been wrong in the past, and so I've not only taken and updated the strategies to be current to the market, but also taken a ton of feedback from over 600, almost 700 students now on different learning styles and different ways to adjust the training and how to provide resources and visuals that go along with that. And what are the key bottlenecks that even when you give someone the what and the how, where do they get stuck? And
Yeah,
so I've kind of worked through those things, and I plan to continue evolving it. But we have a new community, we have a new resource hub, we have all new trainings, a new classroom, new staff, and new trainers coming in. Every aspect is overhauled, and I'm already thinking about how we can improve it. And so, yeah, that's it.
yeah, yeah. And, since UCM 4.0 came out, I'm so busy these days because I came into UCM and then very quickly I met so many people and I managed to find work. And of course, I'm working with UCM and then I found another offer. And so I'm so swamped. I haven't been able to check that much out. But people contact me these days with the same messages like, hey, I'd like to ask you 3 questions about the journey in your career. And I tell
Right,
them, I've only been doing this for 3 months, right? But
right,
nonetheless, I seem to have a name and people come to me and confide in me, which is
right,
it's such a humbling feeling to have people to come to me and come and ask about how I managed to kind of make a name for myself, start a podcast just simply from networking. And
right,
that all came from UCM. And so what I want to ask, which I think is a really big hot topic right now, is personal branding. And it's not just about writing posts and commenting on posts. It's
right,
about videos now. I mean, I have a podcast.
right,
I decided, you know what? I'm just going to take a leap of faith, put a podcast out there because I'll gain visibility and it's going to serve a purpose. It's going
right,
to really help a lot of people that watch. I mean, I'm not
right.
making money off of this. And a lot of people that watch even contact me and they say, man, like I've been struggling a lot in my networking journey. And it's really awesome that I could watch your episode and it helped me. So, what do you have to say about the direction of personal branding these days in the remote sales space?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and there's a couple things to cover. I think when we introduced personal branding to remote sales, and same with networking, it was kind of just like shunned a little bit, and like, oh well, uh, that's not going to do anything, or that's a waste of time. And I think with anything, the early adopters always kind of gain the most benefit. So the people that 3.5 years ago were like, you know what, I'm going to get ahead of this thing. Right, they've built up some amazing brands, and I think there is so many elements. It can be video, it can be text, it can be written communication, it can be different platforms. But I think the message that I really want people to understand here is you have a brand whether or not you're intentional about it. And I think for a lot of people, your brand is your name and then question mark who, and And that's not what I wanted, right? I wanted to be intentional about, hey, people are going to see me or think or not know me, and that's part of my brand. If I'm inconsistent, that's part of my brand. If I'm invisible, then my brand is invisible. And so for me, it's not so much about the application. Each person can take it and make it creative and make it their own. But for me, it's about being intentional and having the ability to build a reputation and visibility, because at the end of the day, there's only so much time. And if all you're doing, the classic sales trainers will tell you, skill's all you need. But at the end of the day, if no one knows you have skill, then where's the opportunity there? And I've seen some great salespeople who didn't take the time to build their brand, who thought, well, skill's all I need. They get into an offer, everything's going great. They make 20, 30K, and then that offer crashes. Now what? And they realize that there's people that don't have the track record of them, don't have the skill level, don't have the work ethic, that are getting their opportunities. And that's because they took the time to make that investment. Now, it's a compounding interest effect, meaning just like an investment account, if you make those little consistent actions, it pays off over short and long term. But it's about getting started with something. And that doesn't have to be, hey, look at me, I'm an expert. Like we talk about in UCM, there's many different roles to play in personal branding. It doesn't have to be the authority or the expert, right? It can be, hey, here's my journey, right? Someone like yourself was great at taking the journey and being humble about it and say, hey, I'm not 20 years in the game here, but come along with me. Another person was Jay Daniel, where he made a video. This is my road to 10K, day one. It was a 2-minute video. If you look now, that's probably got about 40,000 views. And he used that to gather those eyeballs. And we know that attention is the currency these days. So I think it's no longer the advantage it was 3 years ago. I think at this point, it's a disadvantage if you don't do it. It's detrimental if you don't put the time in now. I think you're seeing more and more people struggling to get those opportunities because no one knows they exist.
Yeah. And, I had Joel Elster on this podcast not so
Great guy.
long ago. Yeah, I love Joel. He's a great guy, nomadic closer. And he said, if you're the most incredible salesman in the world, and I want to hire you on the spot as soon as I meet you, but I don't know who you are, how
Right.
can I hire you if I've never seen you in any videos, if I've never heard about you from anyone? And so
Right.
the personal branding is so important. And it's
100%.
just the reality. We have to do it these days. Even if we don't like putting ourselves out there and being a public figure, it's necessary. It's almost like a
Right.
resume these days.
Exactly. And I wanted to say that in that we think of personal branding as a podcast or something you're putting out, but your social profile is part of your brand. Your resume is part of your brand. The application you put out, there is no way to move forward without being seen in some way. Allows you to get maximum exposure and minimum effort and build a reputation that precedes you, which is extremely valuable, especially when you look at the statistics. 85% of hiring managers are checking out your social profiles before the interview, right? So even if you don't want to put out content, right, be in the comment section, right? Optimize your social profiles. Like, start with the minimal things and get that momentum. Once you start seeing the benefit of those things, then it becomes exciting and an opportunity. But start with the minimum viable. If you've been resisting it, just think, how can I be more visible today than I was yesterday? That's where
Yeah.
I would recommend starting for anybody.
Yeah. Just 1% more visible, and it really compounds. It has compounding
It really
interest.
does. Yeah.
Now, it's really interesting, JD, because I've talked to people that have been in the remote sales industry for 7+ years. Like you would call them OGs in the game that have made serious monthly income. And they have all said to me, JD is way ahead of the game. Like when it comes to networking, you realize the power of networking in a very interesting way. It seems like you realize that instead of going to the business owners, you're going to go to the employees or the sales professionals, become friends with them, or at least get to know them, and then network your way into finding a position.
Right.
And did you come up with this on your own, or did you research this, or were you just trying everything you could because you felt desperate? How did that come about? Because That's pretty, it's pretty impressive that you just did that all on your own.
Right. Yeah, I think it's actually a little bit of everything that you just mentioned. I think the first was maybe out of a little bit of desperation and probably a little bit of spite. I have to be honest, sometimes that does fuel me, and that um I wasn't getting the respect, not that I feel like I deserve, but that I feel like I needed to be able to excel. I knew that I'd been kind of sold a crock in that if I just work hard, if I felt like I can be doing something more here, but I wasn't getting the opportunities. And I realized that on paper, I don't even know if people are seeing this, but I was spending hours and hours and hours filling out applications and not even getting like a no thank you, but just being ignored. And I started thinking about this kind of not how I can get a job, but how I can get this level of respect where I'm not ignored.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
realized that, hey, business owners don't respect applicants. Like I always say, you never hear a business owner say like, "Oh, I spent the weekend with a bunch of applicants in Vegas and we had a great time." Like it's 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 just they're a dime a dozen as far as the value totem pole. And so I started thinking first, like, who do business owners respect? And it came to me like business owners respect other business owners. Business owners hang out with other business owners. Business owners do masterminds with other business owners. They travel with other business owners. And so that was the first concept is how can I align more as a business owner? And it kind of clicked in that I started looking at who else has a position kind of similar to mine, but operates like a business owner. And I thought, well, freelancers, right? Freelancers have been doing this for a long time. Like if I'm a Facebook ad specialist, if I'm an email marketer, if I'm a copywriter, what do? I market myself as a business first and then my service, right? It's like, it's me first. And I realized, wow, like why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we organically marketing ourselves rather than just like, hey, pick me? And so the first was not like, oh, I'm going to network. The first was, I wonder if we can apply organic marketing principles to gain the visibility and respect of these business owners. Because at the end of the day, it's very hard for a business owner to say, hey, you're doing the exact same thing as me. I don't respect you. Right. Like it's kind of looking in the mirror. And so I started just modeling those principles, and obviously I'm not going to take out ads and, I'm not going to build a funnel. But I thought, well, what about kind of an organic networking approach that's very similar, right? Like, what if I could DM set myself? And I started thinking about lead gen. And that's when the idea of referrals came in, where I'm like, as a salesperson, what are the best leads that I have? Oh, it's referrals. Every salesperson loves a referral. That's the best we can get. And so I thought, I bet you a lot of the jobs that I'm not getting the call for are getting referred to someone. And then it just made me, it kind of clicked that maybe I've been going too direct or too indirect through the application, but maybe it's the middle ground. And so I thought, let's kind of play this 6 degrees of separation out and start working around the business owners. And let's be intentional about, instead of who's hiring, let's be intentional about who do I want to work with and who do they work with.
Mhm.
And just started making a list of like, here's 20 companies I want to work with. Here's 10, 15, 20 people that work with that company, whether it's their marketers, their employees, their salespeople, their managers. And I started targeting that area, and boom, like within 2 weeks, I had 6 offers and
Wow.
ended up choosing one. And the rest was kind of history. I made 120K in 4.5 months compared to I was averaging about $1,100 a month previously.
And it's interesting that you said play the 6 degrees of separation game, because I actually read a statistic that there was a study done on Facebook that there is an average of 3.2 degrees of separation
Right,
in everyone in Facebook, okay, in
right,
terms of friends lists. So for the audience listening to that here, that literally means that there is probably a business owner, which is a friend of a friend, which is only a friend of a friend. That's only what, 1 degree of separation.
right.
So in the remote sales space, there's probably only 1 degree of separation with multiple people that you have that can get you into a job, so long as you present yourself well and you build those relationships with people.
Oh,
And
it's incredible.
yeah,
It's incredible. And like I heard something the other day, even it's getting closer. right? Like it's 6 degrees. It used to be 6 degrees. Now you're talking about 3 degrees.
Yeah.
There's someone that I had dinner with in Guatemala that I know very well that we share this space with, Michael Dunleavy, right? And he shared a picture of him on a Zoom call with Elon Musk the other day, right? And so it's like we have to get out of these ideas that we're so far apart. We're closer than ever and we're more connected than ever. But we play this weird pedestal game that these people are up here because they have the things that we value. But we are all connected. And just because someone started earlier than us or was born before us or has an extra zero that they're somehow in a different category, we have to break down those barriers and realize we're all humans and we're all much more connected than we think we are.
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting question because this was brought to my attention a while ago from a personal coach that I have. And, he has 30 plus years of experience in sales and leadership training and presentations. And he said that there are people in business you will see. He explained the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
And at the bottom, we have a lot of scarcity. So it's just food and resources. And
Right.
then at the top, we have self-actualization. And he said, you're going to meet a lot of business owners and very successful people, and they are at the top of that pyramid in self-actualization. They're not
Right.
concerned that much with making money anymore. In fact, they're more concerned with legacy,
Right.
taking someone under their wing and improving them, someone that has a good attitude.
Right.
How can someone move from that scarcity up to that self-actualization so that they can communicate with those business owners and the people that have an abundance mindset so that they will take them seriously? How can they make that
Right.
shift in mindset so they don't believe that there's all of these hierarchies and that they're not allowed to speak to the person up here? Because like you said, it's not true.
Right. I think it takes, in a weird way, it takes understanding the rules of economy. Once I started learning, because again, when I wasn't winning in the economy, I was like, well, maybe I don't even understand the gameplay, right? It's like, trying to play chess and just moving the pieces around and wondering why you're not winning games. And so the more I understood about economy, the more I kind of understood about human interaction, in that oftentimes we, again, that pedestal, we put what we value as the market value. And that's a very consumer mindset. Right? It's like a perfect example is, oh my goodness, like having a six-figure job would change my life and it would change my family's life and it would allow all these things. And I've never had it before. And all of a sudden we expand this value. And then it's, well, what do I have? What does little old me have to give that's in exchange of this six-figure dream life value thing? And that's a total misunderstanding of the economy, in that what you value the thing as is not the market value. It's not what the other person values. To the other person on the other side, right? And this is just one example, but to the employer, they're thinking, oh, I need to fill this role and I don't want to go through the hiring process. So I'm trying to save time. I'm thinking about it from revenue standpoint. Every time we make 100 grand, we make someone else 1 million. It's always like, that's the beautiful thing about this space, is it's always advantageous to the other side. And so I think one of the things is seeking an empathy or a level of curiosity to not project your own values, your own insecurities, your own, imposter syndrome onto another person. You touched on a very important thing, which is there's two elements that are very leverageable. Is one, I call it the "is this all there is" moment. So what's proven to happen is, after you meet a certain level of your psychological or hierarchy of needs, you kind of get to this point where you have significance, you're accomplishing things, you have connection, you've met all those levels, and then it's kind of this like, well, what's next? Or is this all there is? Right? And you see a lot of like very successful people get into philanthropy or like the eat, pray, love, going off to India and
Yeah.
finding themselves. And that's kind of that revelation, is like a sense of growth and contribution. And contribution is one of those leverageable values. I think the other side of it, it doesn't even have to be at the hierarchy, is reciprocity. Right? And so, like, it feels good to do good things. It feels good to help it. As a mentor, the sense of purpose I got, I can't even begin to describe it. And so it's not like, oh, why would JD do that? selfishly, it feels so good to do, right? And
Yeah.
so I think understanding that these people understand the abundance, they probably had mentors that helped them, and it benefits them. They're not doing it because they feel bad for you, or they're doing it because, you're some loser that they just want to help. They're doing it because they understand the value, they think in abundance, right? And it feels good to them. And so I think really tapping into that and understanding from their perspective, not projecting, is such a huge and important part.
Yeah. And when I listen to you speak, JD, you're very insightful on many topics, especially psychology and human development. Now, who are some of, I would imagine that you've learned a lot about personal development through specific coaches, whether they be personal coaches or whether they be very famous coaches such as Tony Robbins. Who are some of the personal development coaches or icons out there that have made an impact on your life?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Robbins is obviously a huge one. I think I said on a podcast earlier, him and Tim Ferriss kind of combined to change my life and change the trajectory of my life for totally different reasons. But um, for me, I think it also goes back into not so much personal development coaches, but people who took control of their own lives and embody what it means to develop as a human being and embody those values. And so I think there's someone like Tony who understands the intricacies and the tactics and strategies. And I think that's really important, but also modeling the behavior and the thoughts and the actions of people who have excelled in any area has really been helpful to me. Modeling is like the ultimate cheat code to life. And that I realized very young that if I was going to make it, it was me. And if I was going to screw it up, it was me. And what I wanted to do was take ownership on the making it part and kind of delegate the screwing it up part. And so I realized, like, early on, modeling others' behavior and kind of taking me out of the equation and studying how other people operate, I think was really important. That and I would say, like, getting into, before I got into psychology, I got into philosophy. And I think they're so deeply tied together, because I think you can learn the tactics and you can learn the strategy, but there's something deeper that allows someone to implement or not. And so I think, like, Marcus Aurelius was a big one. And I think one of the books that really changed my life and changed the trajectory as well was Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
I
That to
knew you
me,
were going to say that. It popped in my mind right
nice.
before you said it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, he just, again, like, all of these tactics, when I've when I've felt the most depressed, when I've kind of hit rock bottom, I've always found it came back to meaning and kind of two sides. What does my life mean? Like, why am I here? Some of those deeper philosophical questions that affected my psychology, right? And then also the ability to shift the meaning of something, of an experience, of an interaction, of a trauma, of a consequence. To me, that is the cornerstone of the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of, just significance, success, all of these things. I think underneath, it's the meaning that you give your life and assign your life, and the meaning that you assign the things that happen along this experience.
Yeah, and because I just read that book. That's crazy because I thought about that name as soon as you said it, and I read that book about a year and a half ago, and I would say that that had a very big impact on me, especially a quote that he had for someone that he who has a why can conquer any how, I
Mm,
believe it was.
yeah.
And but philosophy is very interesting.
Ah, I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I think, like, as I kind of had those cornerstones of understanding myself, and understand why I am the way I am, and being able to kind of uncork my identity from the way I act. That was super helpful. Robert Greene is amazing. His books are, I think, very readable, and probably one of the first. I don't know if he's. I guess you would put him in that category, but I sought him more for disorganization was Stephen Covey. Some of his stuff is just classics, and just again and again. And even Brian Tracy. There's just so many, but you can
Yeah.
draw inspiration from anyone.
So we've gone over quite a lot of stuff here. I mean, there's so much other stuff I guess we could go over. I mean, we're going down to Medellin, Colombia in 2 months. I transitioned from being an oil pipeline laborer, shoveling all day, all getting into remote sales through joining UCM, networking, receiving mentoring from you and mentoring from Hunter Daly, and mentoring from every person that I went to meet during my networking meetings, because you had explained to me that when you network, it's like you're getting pieces of wisdom from everyone and you're
Right.
learning so much at the same time. It's much better than just reading a book,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it's such an interesting, I mean, you just need to learn by experience and by taking
100%.
action. Can you just say a little bit more about imperfect action? Because you always mention taking imperfect action. It's so important for people to know.
Right. Yeah, I think we're often so afraid to screw up, and it leads us to the ultimate screw up, which is to never try, to never attempt, to never move forward. When you look at the first, the first of anything, right? You look at Mr. Beast first video, you look at some of your favorite artists' first songs, it all sucked, right? Like you have to embrace that suck. You have to, it's tied to a growth mindset, but I don't think people realize how valuable the data is from taking imperfect action. The chances of you sitting on the sideline and formulating the perfect plan with no errors, where you never get punched, where you never get knocked down, the amount of time you're talking about 10 lifetimes, and even still, something is going to happen. And so, what I've realized is for me, life does not punish my errors. I always say that I've made as many mistakes and as many errors as anybody could ever imagine. And life has always been good to me. I've always learned from it. I've always kind of gotten lucky from it. I've always came out of the other side more knowledgeable. Again, like screw ups come from experience. Experience is, the form of wisdom. And so I've always tied the mistakes or the errors to the wisdom. And I think that you have to be willing to start. You have to be willing to know that not everything's going to be perfect. And it's the attempt and the data, the results that come from the attempt, and knowing that you can take a growth mindset, and anything worth doing, you're going to have to develop at some point along the way. I kind of call it like the junior high dance disease, in that if you watch a bunch of kids playing anything, they suck, right? Like, ever watch 5-year-olds play soccer? They're
Yeah.
horrible,
Yeah.
but they're having a blast, right?
Yeah.
They're having a blast and they're developing. At one point, none of us could hold our heads up. Everything we are, we develop. But somewhere along the lines, and it's around that junior high dance, we realize that people are watching us, and we
Mhm.
realize that there's judgment, and that scares us, right? Maybe we get made fun of, maybe someone, there's bullies, whatever it is, right? And then it's like, whoa, there's consequence for not being perfect. All of a sudden we're being judged on tests, and we're getting trouble for not having the right grades. And all around us, all of a sudden it went from all fun and games and just try your best to no, you are being judged, and it's pass or fail. And so I think we hit that point then where it's like, whoa, no one warned us about this. I was a kid yesterday. Now this can affect my school and grades, and people are talking about college and all these things, and we just put the brakes on. And I think that we have to challenge that again. We have to go back to falling in love with the process and falling in love with making errors, knowing that there's no other way around it, that everything, especially worth doing, we're going to have to get great. We're not going to be great. And so I think imperfect action is that way to get started and get the ball rolling, so that you can get that data and make adjustments on the fly.
Right. And before I wrap this up, there's one thing that I always ask everyone that comes on this show, and I think you're going to answer this very well. To all the people watching this, to everyone in the audience that is having difficulty, they feel stuck, they just feel like they're struggling in their networking journeys. They may be incredibly introverted, they may be nervous. It's hard for them to reach out to people, even though they're trying their best, they just feel defeated. What words of encouragement and what words of advice would you give to those people right now?
I think the coolest thing about the question is you said those people. It's not one person. And so the person who's watching this, they identified and they didn't hear those people. What they heard is me. I'm that person. But then how many other are there that person? And so again, everybody's sitting on the sideline afraid to jump in when realize you're the majority. More people feel like that than the natural networkers who just jump in and feel comfortable in every situation. So what I would say is resist the urge to put on an identity or become a person or grab the spotlight. Start where you are. And I would say start with finding other people. That would be my first start would be, does anybody ever feel resistance to networking? Does anybody ever get writer's block when it comes to content? Like turn it into a question and build a community around like, who are my introvert networkers? Right?
Yeah.
Like again, there's so often we think we have to be like, all right, I'm going on stage and I'm going to be in front of 5,000 people. It's like, find the misfits, find the people like you. And what you realize and what I've realized, and I used to feel alone in this space. And the more I network, the more I realize like I'm not alone in that a lot of people feel like me. And the more I was willing to say, okay, well, again, part of finding your tribe and your connection is repelling people that don't fit those core values, right? And so I think understanding that it would be a nightmare to have 8 billion friends. You wouldn't have any deep connection, right? To have that many connections wouldn't be good. So again, how many do you need? How many people do you need that are like-minded, that support in this journey and know that the person you're reaching out to might feel the exact same way? And so be yourself, right? Don't try and be anyone you're not. And a little tip that I always share in UCM that really helps people get started, instead of coming in and being the authority or this is my 10 ways to handle objections or this is what I do, come in and play the supporting cast role, right? What I mean by that is look for people that are already doing good, that already have the attention, and support them, right? Get involved in the comments section, right? Find your favorite podcast and share it and shout the person out who's the podcast. Find a YouTube video of a coach that you really like and share their video and give the insights, because then the person that you're sharing about, they get the spotlight, they get all the attention, but you still get all the credit and you get the association. So I think for me right now, the supporting cast members, those are the ones that are winning, because again, it's also a great defense. And that what can someone say? They can't be like, oh, who is this Steven guy that's always supporting everybody, right? Like it makes you indefensible, right? And you still get the value of attention. You still get to contribute. You still get to hold that space without that authority spotlight. So just go out and support the communities. Think of this like a neighborhood and go meet your neighbors and support the community. That's how I would approach it.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap this up. And first, just before I go, I want to say to the audience here, if you're on the fence about joining the Undeniable Mastermind, just jump over and do it, because it changed my life. I now have 2 offers in the remote sales space. I work with an awesome person, JD Daley. I've met so many incredible people along the way. What a change this is, switching from a oil pipeline laborer to being in remote sales and having a bunch of new friends and a bunch of great contacts and having a ton of opportunity. What a difference that has made. So either reach out to JD Daley or reach out to me. And I hope you join the team. And yeah, we'll just wrap this up. We'll just wave goodbye to the audience.
Awesome.
See you
Thanks,
later.
Steven. I really appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, I loved having you on, man. That was great.